Hello! In this video, we're going to look at how to create a list of lists. More specifically, we want to create something like this. A list that contains a certain number of empty lists nested inside it. This is obviously not a problem if, as in this case, we only have, for instance, 2 or 3 of them. But what happens when we want to create a longer one? Now, at this point, you might remember the product trick that works like that. For instance, if we want to create a list called nums with 10 times the number 0, we can do it in this way, and there it is. Unfortunately, it turns out that this does not really work in the case of lists of lists, and I can show you that. That would mean that we'd create a list with a list inside and multiply that, for instance, by 10. Hold on, this seems to work actually. Let's have a look at it. Is it what we wanted? It really does look the same as that one. The fact is, it isn't the same, and you'll find out as soon as you try to append to one of the inner lists. So for instance, let's say, I don't know, the second one, and let's write something like wrong of 1, you know, that would be this list, and we can append something to that. Let's just put something, and now let's have a look at what happened. And it turns out that this word spam has been appended to all the lists in this list of lists. So why is that? The reason for that is, of course, that all these lists are actually the same list. And you can check that very easily. So you can ask yourself, for instance, is wrong of 0 the same list as wrong of 3? And the answer, of course, is true. And which isn't the case for the short one that we tested around here. So if I do that, that is of course false. So these are 3 separate lists, but these 10 copies are 10 copies of the same list. And I think that becomes a bit more evident if you write this wrong definition like that. Again, this does exactly the same, but now you see that actually list, which is the constructor of the list, gets called to create one list within this outer list, and then this gets multiplied 10 times, so it gets copied 10 times, but they're all copies of the same list. Okay, so incidentally, this would not be a problem if we were dealing with tuples, because if we had something like that, so a list of tuples defined as, you know, a list containing one tuple multiplied times 10. This would look very suspicious again, but if we were to act on one of these tuples in this way, for instance, tuples of 2 plus, let's add another tuple to that. So for instance, a tuple 1, 2. Right, if we run this bit of code and then we check out the content of list of tuples, what we see is that this time only the third tuple has changed. So why is that? Well, the fact is tuples are immutable objects, so each time you add a tuple to another one, you're actually creating an entirely different tuple, and that gets assigned to the third slot inside this outer list, so that you now have a different object inside. So if you look at what has happened here, basically if I go like list of tuples of 0 is that the same as list of tuples of -1? That is indeed the same, so all these other tuples are all the same. This one has been replaced with a new one, so it's no longer the same one. By the way, this pattern is not very useful really, because, you know, when you are creating a tuple, you don't really intend to change it afterwards, so you don't create an empty tuple in order to add stuff to it afterwards. In that case, it's far better to use a list. But all this said, so how are we going to create a list of lists? And the way to do it, that generalizes this one to a longer list. And the way to do it, to use a list comprehension. So you'd write something like that. And there we go. We have our long list. It looks very much like this one, but this time the lists are all different. So for instance, long one of 0 is long one of 1. This returns false, which means that you can append to any of these long one of 5 dot append ham, and what we get in this case is that, as we wanted, we have changed only the content of one of these lists. So give me a like if you've also got caught once at least in your life by this pitfall, as I have at least a couple of times. And don't forget to subscribe, and many happy hours of coding with Apache Python.